So we've gotten some time with the brand new mechanics of flow aura, hitbox changes, and health bars, so I wanted to do a breakdown of exactly how each class benefits from these changes, so you can get a better handle on what the game feels like now. I do want to say briefly though, even the weapons that have the worst benefits from these still feel better than they did pre-patch. At the end of the day, this is still mostly an overall buff. Before we go into the actual classes, here is a quick overview of what these mechanics are. Flow aura. This gives you 30 seconds of 30 ability points, or 3 mains worth, of run speed, swim speed, ink resistance, and intensify action. While you have this perk, if you get a kill or assist, it'll add 10 seconds to the duration, but the duration caps at 30 seconds. So if you have like 25 seconds and you get a kill, you're only going to get 5 seconds out of it. There are effects that allow aura to be triggered on 2 kills in rapid succession instead of 3. This includes paint, killing an opponent with aura, or doing damage. It's also worth noting that assists for aura have to be done via also dealing damage to opponents. Things like point sensor assists do not count. Health bars. These proc whenever damage is taken, but is not visible when hiding unless if there is a location tool on the opponents. You can see health bars for both enemies and your teammates. Hitboxes. In general, squid form is harder to hit and kid form is easier to hit. However, the less range you have, the more lenient it is on both forms. But again, even on the extremes, kid form is still at least slightly easier to hit, and squid form is at least slightly harder to hit. That said, let's break down the basics. First up for shooters, pretty much all the spray or short range shooters are going to win here. They have more lenient shots on the new hitboxes, easy squid form access, and gain quite a lot from the aura buffs. They really only have a harder time when it comes to painting passively. The others still benefit, but they don't have the crazy shots that short range weapons do. This also applies to the semi-autos. L3 benefits a lot from the strafe speed and jump RNG, and while Squeezer has perfect accuracy, it benefits a lot from the mobility. There is one exception though, and that's H3. This weapon spends a lot of time in human form, has to land precise shots, and doesn't really get a whole lot out of aura. Rollers are all a huge benefit of aura, which might seem strange because they don't really get much out of the run speed or intensify action, but remember this ability doesn't show your location like Tacticooler, which makes it great with Ninja Squid, and the wide horizontal flicks from rollers makes it easier to tag people with the hitbox changes. They are slower weapons, so they'll be a little bit easier targets as well, especially Dynamo and Flings' vertical flick, but the positives outweigh the drawbacks way too much here. Chargers don't really get a whole lot out of aura, but it's not bad either. Run speed is nice on maps like Crableg for the Greats, or just straight up good for Squiffer, Bamboo, and Pencil. Swim speed is nice for survivability, and Res and IA admittedly don't do too much. Hitbox wise, the long range weapons don't benefit as much obviously, but I feel like being able to have even slightly easier targets on human form opponents makes them amazing at punishing slower midline weapons more consistently. Health bars also have a rarer use case here, being easier to go for partial charge kills on opponents. Overall, I would say it's neutral. Some new utility in places where shots are easier, but mobile targets are harder to pin down. This definitely benefits unscope more than scope though. Next up is buckets. They get a moderate use out of aura. Not much from the intensify action or run, but swim speed and res are amazing for it. Sloshers are a bit more exposed in human form, especially slower ones like Explo, but that one being heavyweight gets more out of its swim speed. Tri-Slosher Nuvo is kind of interesting, as this weapon alongside Rapid later down the line benefit a bit from being able to spec into more charge-up focused builds while being able to proc mobility from this effect. It is a bit risky, but that might be a cool trade-off for these weapons with their lower cooler output. I'd say this change benefits Tri, Dread, and Slosher more neutrally, while Machine and Blob are slightly worse affected. Explo definitely has it weakest of all though. Trapping enemies is a huge deal for it, so now there's another way that people can proc ink resistance to deal with that, and it's exposed by far the most in its human form. Splatlings all get a ton out of the aura procs if they can get them. More than pretty much any other classes, they benefit heavily from all abilities, and Nautilus in particular has a good tool to trigger it with its Ink Storm. However, they're definitely the class hurt by the most with the hitbox change, as they end up spending quite a lot of time in human form. To me, I think it'll still be worth it for not, or maybe ability-wise for edit, as they have ways of keeping aura active, and Nautilus's charge hold helps with squid form, but the other Splatlings just sadly seem worse. Luckily, Mini is still very strong, and Heavy's buff kind of makes up for this, but Ballpoint does not feel equipped at all. Hopefully we see something with that weapon. Blasters are an interesting one. Like with Sloshers, they both win and lose on the hitbox changes, having an easier time hitting mobile opponents, but more exposed when firing as well. But fast-firing blasters like Luna, Clash, and Rapids probably benefit more. Aura is amazing for all blasters, especially with the added RNG buffs, giving a great way to focus on directs and close the gap a little bit when compared to S-Blast. Cooler Rapid, like I mentioned earlier, seems like one of the biggest winners for it though, but overall I feel it's neutral for most blasters and a positive for the more mobile ones. Brushes are a class people panicked about a bit, given rolling is, you know, a larger target in human form, but I actually don't think it's that bad. The class is still okay at using squid form, benefits from Aura quite a lot, especially if you pair Ninja Squid with it, and also might be one of the few weapon classes to get a lot out of health bars, as brush damage is notoriously inconsistent and makes it a lot easier to tell what you're doing. I'd still say it will take a lot of adjusting, as rolling is going to be worse, but I think they're going to end up neutral or even slightly positive as players adapt to the changes. Dualies are an interesting case. Many short-range ones have fast squid form access and access to larger shots, especially Dapple Dualie being a huge winner. They also get a lot out of aura buffs and are good at proccing it with their more combat-focused playstyle compared to shooters. However, they also spend more time in human roll via their dodge rolls, especially for Gluga, Tetra, and Dualie Sculptures. I'd still say it's a net positive though, but Dapple Dualie might be the candidate for the biggest winner out of all of these changes. Umbrellas are up next, and this is the class that benefits by a landslide the most from the health bars and hitbox changes. When shooting people in human form, it feels much easier to get a consistent amount of pellet damage, though it is harder in squid form admittedly, and the health bars give you a good indicator as to exactly how much you're doing anyway. Shielding and swimming afterward is also great with the buffs. It's easier to stay inside your tent shield with 10 Umbrella, or mix up your movement with the other options. One downside though is that these weapons do use human form quite a lot, which means shield flaring and strafing are going to be weaker. But I don't think shielding is more consistent, as it seems like the hitbox for that is also slightly larger. That said, I think overall this is definitely a positive for the class. Next up is Stringers. Compared to other long-range options, the access to AoE on Wellstring and Tri-Stringer gives them easier ways to work around the hitbox changes. Health bars are extremely useful for them as well given the chip damage, and Aura is amazing on all bows for its mobility perks. While Reflux doesn't get as much out of it compared to the other ones, the shorter range means it doesn't suffer as much from the hitbox changes. Overall, a nice positive for a class that's already on the rise, and you can check out this video if you want to learn more about that. Splatonas honestly don't have too much to cover. Wiper strafing and mid dash slash are a little bit more exposed, but the class's wider horizontal hitbox gives a way to deal with enemies using more enhanced mobility. Aura doesn't give too much for it given the lack of IA and run speed buffs, but it's not bad either. Overall, it seems like a net neutral. Probably the least changed class if I'm being honest here. Oh, and before we wrap this up, let's lightning round all the specials, because those are also affected here. We'll go from more positive to negative. Inkstorm gives easy assist to proc the ability, since it of course does damage, and doesn't have a harder time hitting anyone. Wavebreaker can be great for helping to keep the aura effect, and it's also worth noting that forcing people to jump, and therefore be in human form more often, actually makes the special even stronger now. And finally, I think Super Chump is a bit underrated. Again, being probably pretty decent at triggering aura, and with the hitbox changes, might be better at blocking for teammates. On the neutral side of things, Zuka is definitely an easier target for opponents, but is better at getting aura out of it. Big Bubbler, Missile, and Whale seem mostly unchanged, but occasionally could help you find picks for aura. Booyah Bomb can help you live and trigger it, but also is an easier target with the hitbox changes. Vac and Ultra Stamp mobility benefits a lot from them, but their hitboxes make them a little bit easier to take down from the sides and back. Crab can help proc aura, but doesn't utilize it much while you're in the special. Crab actually has a downside from health bars too, by the way, because you can see the HP of the rider, making it a lot easier to know if they can be taken out with things like Blaster AoE. Cooler overlaps with aura, but can help you sustain it since you have a faster respawn time and it persists through death. Triple Splashdown can help you proc aura, which is pretty useful even if you die in it, but is a bit easier to shoot down, and Screen actually has a unique change in this update. It doesn't let you see health bars if you get hit by it. Besides that, it doesn't do much though. On the negative side of things, I think the biggest losers here are Zipcaster and Inkjet. They aren't really that big of negative changes because the health bars do help a bit with the consistency, but they are also just easier targets that don't benefit a whole ton from Aura. Strike is also a negative change here, as it's basically just standing in human form all the time where it's going to be a larger target. And finally, Kraken can't really utilize many of the buffs while actively taking away from the duration, and the larger squid form on its end lag means it won't benefit as much from those changes. Still, it could maybe help keep the perk sometimes, and Zipcaster and Inkjet will have moments where it's a little bit useful. So even these specials I think will at least feel a little more consistent to use, though they definitely get the least out of it. And that's it. Again, I think everything is going to feel at least a bit better, but obviously not everyone benefits equally from these changes. I've personally found these mechanics extremely fun to mess around with, and I'm curious what you all think in the comments below. I will see you all next time.